Today we're talking about my top 5 Pro Tools stock plugins. So the great thing about these plugins is that you can mix a song from start to finish with them and get professional results. So if you guys want to know what these 5 plugins are, stick around after this introduction. What is going on, everybody? I'm Dan Spencer, and I am the Audio Sorcerer. So this is the channel where I teach you how to perfect your audio recording, mixing, and mastering skills. So before we get to the video, make sure you guys smash that like button. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell to know I have new videos coming out. So without further ado, here we are in Pro Tools, and we're talking about my top 5 best Pro Tools stock plugins. And as mentioned in the introduction, you can actually mix a full entire song using these 5 plugins and get a awesome product with them, okay? So the way I'm gonna demo these plugins for you is I'm gonna use a song that I used in my vocal plugin chain of 2021 video, which I have popping up in the top right corner now, so check that out after this tutorial if you have time. And we're gonna essentially take that same vocal track and we're gonna use these 5 plugins on it and we're gonna make that vocal track sound great. And what this is gonna teach you is that if you are new to recording, that you don't need to necessarily have all the plugins that all of us that have been doing this for a long time have to create something that sounds really good, okay? The stuff that comes with Pro Tools is perfectly fine to get you started and will get you great results. So what I'll do first here is we're actually going to listen to the chorus, and we're gonna listen to the first half without any processing on it, and then we're gonna listen to the second half with all of the processing on it. So essentially at the very beginning of this video, you're actually gonna get to hear the before and after, and then I'll show you each plugin one by one and what it does, and then we'll go from there. So let's take a listen to the song.
Because I love you. My heart is tattooed. These feelings are new. Because I want this to last. For the future and the past, I love you.
Alright, so we took that dry vocal track, which initially sounded pretty good, and we put it in some space. We brightened it up. We brought it a little bit more forward in the mix, even though we have it in some space. And we overall just polished it and made it sound more professional. And we did it all using these 5 Pro Tools plugins that we're going to talk about here in a second. So what I want to do is I'm going to bypass all the plugins and then I'm going to bring them in one by one and talk to you about each plugin so you know how to use them and what they do. And we will start with the first one, which is the Pro Tools Channel Strip. Alright, so this is the Pro Tools Channel Strip plugin here. And what's great about a Channel Strip plugin is that it has multiple effects in it. So down here at the bottom you have your EQ. And then here you have your compressor, and then you have a expander and gate, and then you also have your input level and your output level, and you also have 2 filters down here which can act as your high pass and low pass filters. All right, so you got a lot of good stuff in this plugin. So one thing I want to mention about the compressor here is that it is a surgical compressor. And what I mean by that is that it's not going to give you like analog warmth or characteristics of vintage compressors that other plugins model. It is strictly going to take the loudest points of your song and the softest points of your song and bring them closer together like a digital compressor does. Okay, so keep that in mind. So use it just to smooth out levels. That's the best way to think about using this compressor. All right. So for this plugin here and for this particular vocal track, I obviously used some EQ down here. So I decided to reduce some of the lows here. So I used the low shelf and brought this down. You can grab any of these little dots here and drag them around. And of course you can click on any of the sections down here and fine tune any of the parameters. So this is like your low frequencies, your low mids, high mids, and then your high frequencies. So this is a 4-band EQ, again with 2 filters to work with. So that's pretty good. That's all you should really need unless you have a really messed up recording, okay? And then for this here on the high end here, I needed to get a lot of highs out of this vocal. This was a intimate performance. It's an acoustic song, but just vocals. So we need to get that for this type of song. So that's what I did here. And then I think, what did I boost here on the high mids? Looks like I boosted around 4K. just like 2 dBs, nothing crazy. And then for compressor here, I am getting, if I remember right, around negative 3 dBs of gain reduction. This is where you see your gain reduction on this meter here. And again, I'm just trying to smooth them out a smidge with this because later in this tutorial, we're going to show you one of the plugins that I used to get something a little extra out of it, a little more character. But again, from this initial stage here, we just want to smooth it out a bit. So regarding this vocal track, the only thing I'm using in this plugin is EQ and compression. So what we're going to do now is we're going to listen to the first half with this bypassed, and then I'll bring it in for the second half. So let's take a listen.
Because I love you. My heart is tattooed. These feelings are new. Because I want this to last for the future and the past. I love you.
Alright, so I think that, plugin cleaned it up quite a bit, so I'm really loving what that did to it. So with that being said, let's actually move on to the next plugin in our chain, which is actually the Air Distortion. Alright, so this is the Air Distortion plugin, and the difference between this plugin and the channel strip, which we just went over, is that the channel strip is going to be used pretty much on all of your tracks. Most of your tracks are going to need some EQ of some sort, and a lot of them are going to need some sort of compression. Now, this plugin here is going to be needed to add some character to your tracks because a lot of digital recordings are pretty boring. They're very clean sounding, all right, and they need some character. And this plugin is great for that. So don't let this plugin overwhelm you. I know there's not a ton of buttons in it, but maybe some of the naming of the buttons can confuse you. Don't worry about it. The best way to use this plugin is simply to turn up this drive knob here on the sound that you want to use it on till it sounds more distorted than you want it to be, and then just pull back the mix knob to where you think it sounds good. And that is the best way to use it. So essentially I like to put this right onto the track as opposed to using it on a bus. So that's how I use it on the vocal track here. All right, so I used a very little bit of drive here, and then I pulled the mix back to about 50%. All right. So we're going to listen to the first half bypassed, and then I'll bring it in for the second half. So let's give it a listen.
Because I love you. My heart is tattooed. These feelings are new. Because I want this to last for the future and the past. I love you.
Alright, that actually makes quite a big difference. It actually adds a little sizzle to the voice, and it actually makes it a little bit thicker, and that's what we're going for. I think that sounds great. So let's move on to our third plugin here, which is actually the Bomb Factory BF76. Alright, so this is the BF76 peak limiter, and this is actually modeled after the infamous 1176 black compressor, which is an amazing sounding compressor. And this sounds great on vocals, bass guitar, and pretty much anything that you want to bring forward in the mix. So this is going to be the plugin in your arsenal that is going to add that characteristic to your sound while getting compression. It is essentially the opposite of the compressor that is in the channel strip. The channel strip plugin, as mentioned, is for precision compression. This is going to add character while also doing compression, all right? So speaking of this compressor regarding vocals, the best way to set it is to have the quickest release time here, which is actually 7. So this is going to be all the way to the right. And then for the attack time, you want to make sure you're letting some of the transient through. So if you set this anywhere between 2 and 3, you'll be in good shape. And then for the ratio, you want to set this to 4. And then for your gain reduction here, you want to hit between -7 and -10. And if you set this compressor that way, your vocals are going to sound pretty good, all right? So let's actually take a listen to the track now with this bypass first, and then I will bring it in for the second half. So let's give it a listen.
Because I love you. My heart is tattooed. These feelings are new. Because I want this to last. For the future and the past. I love you.
Alright, so that actually sounds amazing. And right there, if you use this compressor and use it properly, that's going to take your vocals from amateur to professional. The vocal now sounds very forward in the mix, and it sounds very intimate. It essentially took, the EQ that we did in the channel strip, and it took that distortion sizzle we got, and it kind of enhanced it on the high end there, but kept it very controlled. So I just think it sounds amazing at this point. So with that being said, let's move on to our next plugin, which is the Mod Delay 3. Alright, so this is the Mod Delay 3, and you guessed it, yes, it is a delay plugin. And delay is very important when you are mixing music. It is often used in today's music as a choice over reverb in many situations. And I would say that I use delay on pretty much every vocal track that I do, whether it be a fast or slow song. And I like to also use it on maybe lead synth parts, guitar solos, and I don't know, there's some other creative stuff you can do with it. So we'll leave it at that. So the way I like to use this on vocals, at least for this particular song here, is I wanted to create a three-dimensional sound. And obviously I can't crank the delay in this song or it would sound weird because of the type of song it is. So what I did for setting wise here is I set the left side to an eighth note here. You can simply click any of these notes here and it's going to set it to that specific timing based on the tempo of your song, which is great. So the eighth note is actually 238.1 milliseconds. What I like to do on the right side is take an extra 10 milliseconds on top of that and delay it. So I make the right 248.1. So I added 10 to this here, okay? So that means that when you hear the delay, you're actually going to hear the right just a smidge later. So it makes it kind of like three-dimensional. And this is not my trick. I actually learned this from CLA, so I don't want to take credit for it. This sounds fantastic when you're using it like in fast rock songs and everything. I think it sounds great. But it also sounds great, again, when you're trying to create some bit of three-dimensional sound. And that's what I'm trying to do in this thing, just to make the vocals just a little bit thicker and put them in a little bit of a space. All right? So let's actually bypass this first, and then I will bring it in, and we'll see what it sounds like. So let's give it a listen.
Because I love you. My heart is tattooed. These feelings are new. Because I want this to last. For the future and the past. I love you.
Alright, so I'm using it very subtly in the song, as you guys can hear. It's barely there. So if you guys weren't listening to headphones, you probably didn't even really hear it. So if you focus on the right ear, you can kind of hear a little bit of that delay fall off of it. Again, it's just kind of thicken up the vocal a little bit and give it a three-dimensional effect. Alright? So copy this setting down and use it in your mixes, and I think you guys are really going to like it. Alright? So let's move on to our last effect of the top 5 Pro Tools stock plugins, and that is DVerb. Alright, so this is DVerb, and with any mix, you need to have reverb. There's simply no way around it. And you need to have a good room reverb, and you need to have a good plate reverb. And fortunately, this plugin has both of those in them. So to use this plugin, you simply just have to select which type of reverb you want first. So for vocals, I want plate, so that's what I've selected here. And then next, you just need to select the size. So I want in medium. And then you can adjust your decay time. You can do your high cut here if you want to make it less bright. And then one of the most important settings for me is pre-delay. For vocals, I like to use a high pre-delay. Now, I would use a much higher pre-delay if this song was more rockin' and fast. I probably would have this up in like the 150s or 160s, but 59 seemed to work pretty well for this song here. Okay, so let's actually take a listen to this song with the bypass first, and then we'll bring it in, and then yeah, that will be all 5 of the plugins. So let's give it a listen.
Because I love you. My heart is tattooed. These feelings are new. Because I want this to last, for the future and the past. I love you.
Alright, so DVerb did a great job putting the finishing touches on this vocal track. So with these 5 plugins, we mix this whole vocal track, taking it from bland to professional. So even though this tutorial more so focused on a vocal track, as mentioned at the beginning, you can use these 5 plugins to mix a song from start to finish and get extremely professional results. With your channel strip plugin, you got your surgical compression and equalization. And then for your air distortion, that's going to be your saturation. And then for BF76, that's going to be your analog compressor to get some character. And then for your mod delay 3, of course that's delay, and that's going to allow you to put some sounds into some space and get some 3-dimensional effects. And then lastly, with DVerb, that's going to be what you put all of your sounds into. So I didn't say this in the tutorial, but essentially you want to create like one room reverb and put all of your sounds into it so they're in the same space. And then you can use multiple other reverbs like a plate reverb to be kind of like your special reverbs that you would use on certain sounds. For example, you know, the vocals have a plate reverb, and then also maybe a snare drum would have a plate reverb, okay? So those are just some, you know, basic mixing tips that you can use when you are mixing your songs. So I hope you guys like this tutorial and hope you learned something. Pro Tools is great, and the stock plugins that come with it are great, all right? So like I said, you can mix a song from start to finish with all the stock plugins in here, and there's many more. These are just my top 5, all right? So definitely hit that subscribe button if you guys like what you're seeing here, and hit that notification bell to know I have new videos coming out. So with that being said, until the next video, I will see you guys later, and peace out.